Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Anthropology 499. It's the 7th of April. We're on Monday of week 13. We're getting close to the end. Being the 7th here, we are just 3 weeks away from our last day to turn in any late work. So if you got anything still outstanding, please turn it in. Let's take a look at the syllabus next. We're on our last quarter of the semester at this point, on our last paper. We're doing op-eds this next 3 weeks, writing for the local newspaper. And we got a couple assignments coming up this week to help us do it. We got assignment number 7 and discussion board number 8. We're supposed to have quiz number 4 because of some scheduling stuff. I'm actually going to move that down until next week. You're free to take it this week if you want, but it won't be due until the 18th. And I moved it down to the next module. We do have number 7 and discussion board number 8. And we'll be doing, today we'll talk about op-eds kind of more generally. Wednesday, we'll actually be talking about the structure of op-eds as well as looking at Allison's content analysis presentation. Hopefully that's the last one we're going to be doing this semester. And then on Friday, we have a special event. Darcy Littlebadger is a Native American author who will be headlining our Jack Williamson lectureship. And during our class time, she'll be giving a guest meet and greet / Q&A over at Multicultural Affairs. So we'll be going over there as part of our class assignment. And it'll also be part of your discussion board. So let's take a look at that so we can start thinking about this for Friday. So we'll meet over there. Do you all know where Multicultural Affairs is? It's in the Cub in the basement. It used to be a bowling alley before you were born. It's called the alley still. It's like down by the Greyhound Lounge. We could meet here and wander over together. That might be better. So we don't all get lost. If not, I'll have Lauren be here to post up and walk you over if I go over early to make sure our guest author doesn't leave, because it actually starts at like 1:30. So hopefully they don't leave in that half hour before we get there. So beforehand, I want you to come up with 2 questions about writing to ask our guest author. It could be something specific, like how did you break into writing, or it could be like how do you get paid to do writing, or it could be something more specific, like what kind of writing do you find challenging, or how do I write sentences that are not completely run on, or how do I be more engaging, or whatever. Come up with 2 questions you want to talk to the author about. You'll post, when you write your discussion board, post those 2 questions so we can see how everybody's not asking her the same question. Then you're actually got to ask them at the event. Write their response. Tell us what they said. I don't want to hear that you just like thought of these questions and never asked. So write the question, 2 questions that you had, ask the author, write their response to them, and then kind of big picture. What did you learn about writing from the author? How are these perspectives be successfully employed in anthropological writing? So it's your chance to engage with real life authors. There may be other authors from the lectureship there as well. But it will require you to be there on Friday. That way it's not just me at the event by myself. Okay. The other thing we're going to be doing this week is writing op-eds. It's the 4th thing that we're doing this semester and the last thing, which is kind of nice. So here's the rubric. You can find it in Canvas module 13. It's the very first link. I like to put these first. Here's a PowerPoint we'll be looking at in a little bit. I made for how to write an op-ed, as well as three pieces from other authors talking about writing op-eds. And we'll maybe watch a video. I think we'll have time for that. Where are we? So let's take a look at the rubric. First of all, what is an op-ed? Anybody know? Give you a hint, it's in the newspaper. What are newspapers? Do you know? Yeah. Yeah, I told you. Yeah, it's short for opposite of the editorial. And what is the editorial page? How is that different from the rest of the newspaper? What is the rest of the newspaper when it's not advertisement or comics? Uh-huh. But how is that different from the rest of the newspaper? Okay, it's in the newspaper. It's in the name. It's not news, right? How is it different from news? Yeah, it's opinion based, right? So if you get, we'll go to the library next week and we'll actually take a look at some of the local papers and we'll read them and we'll see what's going on. And you'll see that the first, I don't know, 3/4, 80% of the A section is all going to be news. It's going to be like in Clovis, there was a car crash. In Dora, there was a wild cow on the loose. I don't know what news is in Dora. And then the last 2 pages or so are going to be opinions. On the one side is going to be people paid by the newspaper or contracted by the newspaper to write things, usually every week, sometimes a couple times a month. You'll see this in our paper. You'll have regular columnists like Betty Williamson and Wild Bill. You'll also have people more infrequently who write once a month or something, or syndicated columnists. Then you'll have the other page, which is people writing from the local community. This is different from letters to the editor. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's people writing their opinions to the newspaper. About 500, we're shooting for 500 words, and we're actually going to write 2 of them for this assignment. That comes out to be 1,000 words total, which is still pretty short, shorter than any of the other assignments you've had this semester. So you'll write 2 of these. They each should be 500 words. They each should explore a different topic in the news cycle from an anthropologically informed perspective. And one should be about a state or regional issue, something in the Southwest, water in the Southwest, or I don't know, some climate change in the Southwest, or something on the state, right? The state budget, or some law the state's going to pass, or something affecting us as New Mexicans. And the other one is going to be more local. It's either going to be something affecting Portales, Clovis, Roosevelt, Curry County, or even Ian and you specifically, right? I think that there should be more vegan options in the cafeteria or something, right? Or we should have every Friday off so we can travel to Albuquerque, whatever you want to write. So it should be one kind of bigger issue and one kind of smaller issue. Couple things, and so when you put these, you're going to submit both of them together on Canvas, and just like we did for book reviews, I'm going to take probably the 2 or 3 best and submit them either to the regional paper, the Eastern New Mexico Times, or to the Chase, our ENMU paper. I'm not sure if they're putting out another issue before the end of the year. I need to contact them. Okay, so that's just kind of the general overview of what we're going to be doing for the next 3 weeks. We'll talk a little bit about guidelines, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit more about how you actually do it. So let's start, I guess, with a video about op-eds. Our video for it, it's really short. This is Thomas Friedman. Any of you are New York Times subscribers or like to read the Times, he's one of their major columnists. He writes every week and has won all kinds of fancy awards. So he actually knows what he's talking about. This is a column where this is a video he made telling people about how people always come up to me like, hey, I want to write what you do. I want to write a column for the New York Times, or I want to get my piece published. But there's some things you need to know before you get started. So this is him talking for 2 minutes or so about how to do that. And I think more than like structurally, we'll look at structure next time a little bit more, but kind of like what kind of ideas you should be working on or thinking about in your op-ed, and how maybe you should approach it kind of rhetorically. So let's take a look. Yeah, I like that little video from Thomas Friedman talking about 2 things I really like about it. One is this idea of heat and light, right? That when we write op-eds, what we're trying to do is both to illuminate subjects and to think about people's emotions, right? A lot of news tries to be very emotionless. But we're trying to stir passions, and hopefully in a good way. Or I don't want to get the one he says, the negative where people want to get you. The other thing that I think is interesting about this is the second half of the video when he talks about thinking about the machine is what we do in anthropology, right? Thinking about big structures in the world, globalization, thinking about kinship, thinking about economics, politics, gender, all that kind of stuff, as well as people and cultures, right? We are going to write this from an anthropological perspective. So it's not just you giving your opinion, but what I'm interested in is how do we tie this into bigger anthropological themes? How can you use this training that you've gotten not only in this class, but as your in your major as anthropology, as anthropologist, in order to shed a little light on a topic that maybe people outside of the academic sphere, people who've never gone to college or taken an anthropology class, how can we add a little bit something to the conversation and hopefully, share a little bit about what anthropology is to local people as well. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to do. So for this paper, we're going to write 2 500-word op-eds. They must be timely. So don't write about like I don't know, the rise of the internet or something, right? That's past, or like solar panel. I don't know, stuff that's already happened. COVID, probably a op-ed on COVID's not going to run today, even if it's really good, right? Why? Why might it not run today, but it might have run 4 years ago? Right? Why do we care? Why do newspapers care about time limits? Because they're in the business of making money, right? If it's not timely, if it's not relevant, it's not going to sell papers. It's not going to get people to pick it up and talk about it. So they want to be timely. They want to be relevant. It needs to be something that would push the conversation forward, right? We don't want to just kind of go rehash old topics. It needs to be anthropologically informed, right? It's not just from your own perspective. It needs to use clear, persuasive, vivid language. And I think this is something we're going to try this year. We're going to try to. This is kind of hard. Avoid controversial topics. Again, we don't want to like burn too many bridges, and we are trying to get actually published, right? So think about. We'll look at the newspapers here. Think about the newspapers that are published in Eastern New Mexico, right? We've got some rejected last time from them that were just too far, right? This doesn't really fit with what we're doing here, right? We should tax all the churches. We should ban all the guns, right? These just didn't fly with the editors. Even though they were well written papers, they just weren't having it, right? The things that actually did best last time were things that people didn't have a hard and fast opinion on, right? Something that people weren't going to like burn down the newspaper room if you disagreed with them. The two things that actually got published last time, one was about about not boycotting businesses in small towns because of political differences, right? We're all neighbors. We all need to stick together. You boycott someone because they're not on the same team as you, we're not going to have any restaurants left in this town. The other one was about voting and people with disabilities and how there needs to be more accessible options for people with disabilities. Both of those got published because they were interesting pieces. They didn't come from like a set of talking points, right? The newspaper doesn't want to publish something that people have already heard 100 times. Nobody had really published anything like that. So it was much more, people were much more receptive to those kind of arguments than, if you're coming at it and you're trying to tackle one of these most controversial issues, right? So we're going to stick with, it's the same reason we're going to stick with local and state issues that people tend to not get so concreted into their positions, right? Like if people have lots of opinions on the government, the national government, or on international affairs, or the war, Ukraine, or things like that, versus like people are usually much more receptive to having their minds change, which is kind of what we're doing here. When we're talking about something that affects you personally, right? Especially on a local level. So like, I think that, I don't know, hybrid classes at Eastern are a great idea, or they're not a great idea, or whatever, right? Something that affects you. Or I think that there should be more dining options on campus, or that the library needs to have more books and not have just all electronic resources, or whatever, right? I'm not going to like put ideas in your head, but I do want to warn you that just similar to when we did our book reviews, we do have not only me who's grading the papers, we are sending these out for publications. And this is a great thing to put on your CV. So you don't want to like burn the bridges before you even start. So keep in mind what I'm shooting for on this is issues that affect you personally and are something that people try to find something that people don't have a hard and fast opinion about, something that people will be like, huh, I've never thought of it that way before, right? And that's much harder when you're going after, these kind of set talking points on the political agenda. Um, so let's talk about some tips for writing a good op-ed, and we'll kind of use some time to brainstorm for the rest of class. Then on Wednesday, Allison will give her presentation, and we'll look at structure, because I am a structuralist, and I think it's easier for me to grade if I give you paragraph 1, do this, paragraph 2, do this, 3, 4, versus just kind of letting you do whatever. Okay, so what should you do when you write an op-ed, right? Even though this is an anthropological op-ed, and I want you to think about anthropological issues, you want to avoid using jargon, right? Think about our readership. What's the typical level that newspapers shoot for in terms of readership? This is a similar question to when we talked about when we did our audio tours, right? Thinking about our audience. What? Yeah, right. It's very similar to the eighth grade level we shot for in the museum, right? Because this is a rural community, and there are people in this community who didn't go to college, who didn't even finish high school, didn't even go to high school, right? And but who are still newspaper readers. They are informed members of the public, and so we're shooting for that level. We want to avoid jargon. We want to avoid sounding like we're writing to the anthropology class, right? Because that's going to turn people off if they start reading all these. There's all them 50-cent words from them fancy people over at the college, right? That's going to turn them off. We want to engage with them in language that doesn't turn people off. Um, we want to keep paragraphs kind of short and to the point, 4 to 5 sentences for each one. We don't want to have really long run-on sentence over the complicated sentences. When we are writing these, it's good to have for each, because these are really short, you want to have like one argument you're going to try to make, right? I am arguing that, I don't know, that we need to bring back the train between Portales and Clovis, or we need to have a trolley that takes students from campus to downtown and back, or Walmart or something like that, right? We don't want to here's my argument about how I'm going to fix public transportation in the United States. It's too big, it's too much, right? For 500 words. Something small and bite-sized and actionable is much more likely to both get published as well as to have people actually like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We can do that versus I think we should all ride horses again because it would be much more efficient, right? It's not going to fly. When we do this, we want to think about something that's relevant to you. It's much more powerful if it's coming from something that's affected, right? I think that we need to have more handicap accessibility on campus because when I was injured, I hurt my foot and I couldn't go upstairs. And it really was annoying because there was a lot of places on campus where they only had stairs. They didn't have ramps. They didn't have elevators. And so I think we need to think, it made me think about, handicap accessibility a little bit more. And I think we should try to put more of this in place, right? It's much more powerful than just being like, I read a book about accessibility and I think we should go for that, right? So what makes a good op-ed? Number one, having a strong point of view. You don't want to be wishy-washy. You don't want to be like, cars are cool, buses are cool, everybody's doing great. That's not going to get published. There's nothing there to drive the narrative forward. Again, accessible to general audience. You want to use language. You want to use terms. You also want to use topics that aren't going to put people off. You want to use concise, vivid language. You want to use examples and analogies to make your point. And you want to be actionable, right? It's not enough to come up with some pie in the sky idea. We should all live in teepees and be utopia. Well, that's probably not going to fly, right? What's something actionable that we can actually do in our community to make this come true, right? So, for instance, in the one about voting and accessibility, right? Not everybody's disability is always visible, so we need to extend the opportunities for mail-in and early voting for people outside of certain parameters in order to get more disabled people to vote, right? That is an actionable thing. Whether you would agree with it or not, it is something you could do, right? We have 2 extra hours of early voting every day, right? That's an actionable thing that we can do to fix this, right? I want to decrease the amount of cars on the road. So what's something actionable? We can have bike lanes, or we can, put in people drive too fast. So I think we should put speed bumps on the road out here so people don't get hit crossing the road. I don't know, whatever you want. Timeliness and relevance. We need to think about current news. We need to be relevant. It shouldn't be something that's super old, right? Like if you're writing about the election, that's already passed, right? And that's really the benefit of this as compared to an academic article. I submitted a book chapter, not out yet, still under review, or it's still under, I think, second revisions. I submitted it before my daughter was born, and she's a year and a half old, and it's still waiting to come out. It takes a long time. Op-eds are fast. Once you get it out and you send it to the publisher, I think they were in the paper within a week of when I sent it to the publisher last time, and they only publish once or twice a week. So it's pretty fast, right? So you need to be up on the current events. One way you can do this, and we'll go to well, GSSC next week, and we'll look at the newspaper. One way, good way to do this is to see what other people are writing, to read the newspaper, the news part first, see what's in the news, maybe react to that, or read last week's op-eds or opinion columns and react to those, right? That gives you a good hint about what the paper thinks is newsworthy. Because if they printed it last week or 2 weeks ago in the news or the opinion section, they're already got like an emotional buy-in on this, right? And so then your op-ed is adding to the conversation instead of coming out of left field. Yeah, and beyond the topic, your writing is going to be key, right? You don't want to like write badly. That it reflects poorly on you. It'll also have my name on the section because it's like a special section from Dr. Stanley's stuff. I think it's kind of cute that they do. But it reflects badly on me, and it reflects badly on the editors who publish it if you don't put a lot of time and effort. So we're going to do a lot of things to help make sure that it's tip top, right? We're going to read it aloud. We're going to do some reading aloud in class because these are short. And I think reading aloud is a great way to catch errors and improve the flow of your writing, because oftentimes we just kind of, oh yeah, I edited it, I looked at it, but it's a lot easier to catch those little tiny words that you missed, or for me, all those words that you use over and over and over and over. I just did a video on Native American societies, and by the end of listening to that 5-minute video, I used the word society like 55 times, and I was like, I hate this. I don't ever want to hear that word again. Like going back and cutting out the word society whenever I can. We also want to make it look professional. You want to have no misspellings, no wrong dates. This can be difficult. I think there's this really funny example in the rubric. Brett Stevens in one of the articles that I posted up there, sweat the small stuff. Oftentimes, they don't sweat the small stuff, but in writing, especially in short pieces of writing, sweat it, right? Read over each sentence, read it aloud, ask yourself, is this true? Can I defend every word of it, not just the general idea, right? Think about the individual word choices you make. Did I get the facts, the quotes, the dates, and the spelling right? Sometimes those spellings are hard. For instance, the president of Turkmenistan's name is Gurbanguly Malik Gulukevich Berdil Muluk Malahadov. So if you're going to write about the president of Turkmenistan, you better spell his name right, because it makes you look silly if you can't, right? Because you're kind of biting off more than you can chew. But believe me, he says, there's nothing worse than having to write a correction, which is where they have to put a thing in the newspaper the next week and be like, sorry, that person who wrote the column didn't spell this person's name right. You want, if you're using sources, whether that's like citing an academic article, or more likely it's citing some data. According to the CDC, 17% of Americans have this disease, or according to the National Center for Suicide Prevention, X, Y, and Z, right? If you're going to use this kind of data, don't just make it up. Don't be like, 3 in 4 people are depressed. Like, where's that data actually from? And you can cite that either with endnotes or hyperlinks. And avoid plagiarism. Don't steal somebody else's ideas. If you're building off somebody else or you're refuting off someone else, always make sure that you're citing that and you're telling where it came from, so people don't think that it's your idea that you're trying to steal. Yep, clear, concise writing. Yep, not too long. Timeliness, something provocative, unexpected. Here's some other things I like. We'll do this next week. When you're writing an op-ed, a good thing to do is to read the newspaper you're shooting to publish in. Why? Yeah, what kind of stuff they're into, right? It's similar to our academic book reviews. If you're submitting to a place, I'm submitting about, this is I don't know, a foodie kind of thing about food journalism. And they're just like, we don't do food journalism anymore. We cut that, right? Or whatever. Then it wouldn't fit with the guidelines, right? Also, there's guidelines. I've incorporated those into this presentation from the newspaper. But it's kind of also like an academic book review, in that it's not a choose your own adventure. You'd be like, man, I'm really passionate about this. I wrote 5,000 words about why we all need to be vegetarian. They're going to be like, that's a cool story, but we only got 500 words for you. It doesn't matter how much you wrote. These things basically there's little in the newspaper layout, there's like little boxes, right? And they'll take your thing and they'll stick it into the box they fill that box every week. So if your op-ed doesn't fill that box, there's two choices. One, they can sit there and they can try to edit it down to that box, which they probably won't do. What they'll probably do is just throw it away and find someone else's that does fit into that word count and stick it in there, even if it's not necessarily better than yours. We want to have one message. We want to set a goal for what we're trying to accomplish with our message. We want to be a little controversial, right? We don't want to be too controversial that it gets, doesn't get published, but we do want to make an opinion. We want to try to get people to change their minds. We want to describe a problem. We also want to offer a solution. We want to have our own personal accounts if possible, and try to be conclusive when we wrap it up. Okay, so we're going to finish. We're going to do just like before our last one. Most places want a finished piece, so we are going to run by next Friday, turn in a draft, and then we're going to peer review with each other. Again, that way we can really polish it up before we get it sent to the paper. You come up with a title. They often change the titles. Newspapers often do this. You can't get attached to your title, but you can include it to give them some kind of direction about what you're doing. But when we send it in, we'll also send in just a short summary about what is like 1 or 2 sentences. And then just like academic book reviews, you want to avoid sending it out to everywhere. Don't write your best op-ed and send it out to 10 different papers, because you might get them all accepted at the same time. And it's going to be super awkward when you're like, oh, sorry, it's already running in the New York Times last week. Okay. Yep, we did all that. Try to sound, the main thing on this one, I think, is in things to avoid that we didn't already talk about, is that oftentimes people think that they need to sound super smart to be in the newspaper, but it's more important to be clear, right? We want to be clear. We don't want to have people stopping and scratching their heads, or more likely putting down the paper and moving on over to the funny section or the sports, right? We want to have something that's readable, that's engaging, that makes people want to change their minds. Okay. We oftentimes we'll talk about this. It works better if you have some kind of personal connection or you invested in this topic. But don't use this just as an excuse to rant about like that one time this one teacher gave me an F on this assignment. Now I'm going to write an op-ed about it because they don't know nothing. And I want to tell a story about Dr. Stanley and how bad he is. Don't do that. We also don't want to just like narrate your experience. And I'd be like, one time I went on vacation and it was really cool, and I saw these trees and we went to the mountains and this and this and this and this. We're like, okay, so what am I reading, right? So you want to always connect it back to some kind of larger issue. Oftentimes it works if you like start or kind of end with an anecdote, but it's connected to a bigger issue. Like most people don't know, but I don't know. I used to ride my bike to work until I moved to Portales, and now it's so dangerous on the roads out there. We don't have any bike lanes that I had to quit doing this. I think this ties back to bigger issues of public safety and transportation in our community, right? Taking something personal, tying it to bigger issues. Oftentimes you want to, a good idea is to show, not tell. This isn't just an op-ed writing. This is an all kinds of writing. We want to be evocative. We want to paint pictures with our words. We want to use imagery, analogy, metaphor, all these kind of things to get people to visualize, to make these things more than just kind of bland. And while these are emotional, we need to it's a fine line between being completely detached and I don't really care about this subject at all. I'm going to write it in a very clinical kind of way, to being overly emotional and not really having any facts. We want to be, somewhere in the middle, right? We want to use emotion, but use it sparingly and purposefully. So it's very effective when we make these kind of emotional arguments versus people being like, well, what kind of facts or data do you actually have to base that on? Okay. And then the last thing in this part is one of your questions on your quiz, this is actually next week, is the difference between a letter to the editor and the op-ed. These are similar and different. They both appear in newspapers, and they both are a chance for readers to chime in or to clap back or to, I don't know what the right word is, to speak back to the newspaper, right, and to the rest of the community. But they are different. They're different in scope. An op-ed's 500 words, has a persuasive argument, Versus the letter of the editor is much shorter. It's like 100 to 150 words. It's fast, it's opinionated, it's not structured in the same way. Letters to the editors are usually, most often, a reaction to something that ran in the paper. You ran that story about what's the best barbecue restaurant in Eastern New Mexico, and I take issue with that, right? My favorite barbecue restaurant was not listed, and you guys aren't where the hill of beans, right? Or something like that. That's a letter to the editor. Versus an op-ed is going to be something like, I don't know, the importance of having different culinary restaurants in our community or something, right? Both are fact-based and clear, but they do have this different kind of perspective or different kind of structure going on. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. We have 10 minutes left in class. And what I want you to do, just briefly, is to start brainstorming a little bit about some ideas that you might want to work on for your op-ed. And we'll look at the homework on Wednesday, in which it'll ask you to like kind of brainstorm these ideas. But what are you kind of thinking? Do you have any ideas so far about things that you might want to talk about based on the parameters I've given you so far? What's a local issue that you're interested in or passionate about? Something that affects you in either Eastern or Portales or Clovis or wherever you live. Definitely. And I feel that like I thought this when I was in West Virginia. They would always be like, oh, is there a changing table like in the women's bathroom? They're like, okay, like what am I supposed to do with that information? Am I supposed to go in there? Am I supposed to just be like, okay, change them on this patio? Right. So that's like something that's affecting you. Like before I never would have noticed, but now that I have this young one, I'm always changing diapers and I notice this lack of accessibility for people like me. Right. That's great. What's something else that might affect you locally? Definitely, right? Like this is something that affects me personally. Like I spend, I don't know, hundreds of dollars a month on diapers, and that's, that really adds up over the course of the year. That's $150 in taxes or something like that. And so I think that we should have diapers and other kinds of baby supply tax-free in order to encourage people to have more children, right? That is an opinion that affects you. Rare opinions. Yeah. Yeah. Lack of options, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think just frame it in terms of accessibility. Like I need medicine, other people need medicine too. Like this shouldn't be controversial if you got doctors who have written you a prescription, but in our community we only have it. So maybe a solution is we can get prescriptions offline or something like that, right? Doesn't have to, it can be this thing, but it doesn't have to be like divisive, right? You can just try to be like, we all got problems, we all need medicine, and being out here in the middle of nowhere, oftentimes that's real difficult, right? Just imagine if you live in Dora or one of these towns that doesn't even have a pharmacy. What are you supposed to do? So I think that's a great example of how we can like take something that like maybe the editors might be like, oh, I don't know, but then if you frame it in a certain way, it becomes more accessible.
I was thinking about fundraising for the site in the museum.
Yeah, that's great. Right, especially in terms of all the current issues about lack of funding. We're going to cut National Endowment for Humanities or New Mexico Humanities Council or something like that. These are important parts. And I think a great way of doing that is, again, to frame it as inclusive. It's not just about us as archaeologists or anthropologists at this site, right? This is a major income generator for our county, right? People come here from all over to see the Clovis man, the Clovis site, the museum, and this brings tourism and dollars to our site. Now, I actually saw something on this on like one of the Facebook local groups. They're like, Fort Sumner has the Billy the Kid Day, and Roswell's got the alien day. Like, why don't we in Portales have a Clovis day or like an archaeology day to like bring people in, right? And that could be a great, we can do this, we can get funding, and we can make something for this community in order to like bring people here, something like that, right? So I think we still got time on figuring out exactly what you want to do, but I think it's good to brainstorm, and I think trying to think of as broadly and inclusively as possible, in which you can get people who read the paper to be like, dang, I think that's a great idea. I don't know, I ever didn't think of that before. So we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. Come with some ideas. We'll brainstorm a little bit more. Try to think of like 3 or 4, I think is probably good. And then we can cut it down, pick the best ones. Oftentimes they're pretty similar and you can merge it together. On Wednesday, we're going to jump to the second section, which is the structure. And we'll do the A, B, C, D, E, F structure because I love structure. And then on Friday, we'll do we're going to go to the multicultural affairs and have our meet and greet with Darcy Little Badger. So I'll post some information about our guest author on the module. So if you want to like be informed instead of being like, oh, you write books. What kind of books do you write? That's not really like a good question to ask them. Like you should go in there and be like vaguely familiar. So I'll post their Wikipedia page as well as directions to multicultural. But remember for your discussion board this week, you're going to post 2 questions as well as their answers and what that makes you think about writing. So on Wednesday, we'll do Allison's presentation, talk about the structure. We'll look at the homework for this week. And then on Friday, multicultural affairs. Weeks just go like that. And we're almost done with the semester. Okay, that's it for today. Any questions about op-eds, about class in general, anything? What we're doing on Friday? Multicultural affairs. Hopefully, if Lauren's better, she's sick right now, but hopefully, if she's better, I'll probably go there and have her stay here and walk over with you, or vice versa, just so the author doesn't leave while I'm trying to gather everybody up. Also of note, Thursday evening, if you're interested, well, Thursday and Friday this week is the Jack Williamson lectureship. Darcy is our guest of honor at the lectureship. And then on Thursday evening, Dr. Schmidt and I in sociology are running our student event for the Williamsons in the Greyhound Lounge. It's called Cantina Carnival. I think a couple of the different clubs are involved, and moving off anew, some of the art clubs. We have 11 different clubs this year. And the theme or the vibe is like Star Wars Cantina meets Trunk or Treat. Each of the different clubs are going to be setting up their booths. You go around, you get punch cards for participating. There's costumes. You put take your punch cards, your tickets, put them in different little buckets, and win prizes. So it'll be from 5 to 7 on Thursday. And if you're part of the clubs, it starts at 4 for setup, and we'll have pizza and Subway for people setting up, so you can get some food. And you'll get extra credit if you show up because it's my event and I want to see you there. Bring your kids. I'll bring my kids too. So if you can. Okay. See you then. See you on Wednesday. Have a great day.